In this presentation, I'm just going to kind of continue from the previous emotional wellness presentation or lecture and talk a little bit about stress and stress management. Now, how do you know that you're stressed, or do you even recognize when you get stressed, or are you one of those people that you reach a point when the stress becomes consuming and you start to do things that you wouldn't typically do if you weren't stressed? Now, how can you assess and determine the levels of stress from beginning to extreme stress when you're just going to freak out or crash? And then what are some of those signs? Do you do things as bite your nails, pull your hair, doodle on a piece of paper, daydream, just want to sleep, whatever it is? Do you know the signs and the symptoms of your own personal stressful situations? Being able to recognize stress is beneficial in recognizing that you need a management technique to take care of that. Now, let me give you a quick assessment. Here's I just want you to answer yes or no to these statements, and we're going to see how stressed you are. Irritability. Do you seem, recently to have a shorter fuse, or do you find that little things are starting to make you more and more angry? In any given situation, it could be now, it can be in general, it can be, specifically, to this class or to this situation, whatever it is that you're experiencing right now. Do you find yourself being more and more irritable? Yes or no. A sense of humor. Do you find that you're not laughing as much as you used to, or as much as you should? Are things not as funny to you as they would probably be? Maybe you have some friends that will show you something and they're laughing and you're looking at it like, that's ridiculous. So you're feeling a sense of loss of your humor. Worrying. Are you kind of making yourself anxious all the time? You finding yourself worrying about different things that may not have even been manifested, thinking about tomorrow or the next hour or even the next week, reliving or projecting future anxious emotional experiences, which can contribute to a sense of depression. Are you feeling a little bit more worried these days or today than you have been? Doing anything in excess? Are you finding yourself doing anything in abundance, something compulsive or obsessiveness over certain things, whether it be eating or drinking, cooking, going out, anything in excess that you're doing now that you haven't done in the past, and you're finding yourself doing that a little bit more now. Trouble with your memory, finding yourself forgetting on a regular basis. As your body's starting to ache, you start to get up from sitting down and you're like, oh, my back, oh, my legs, my hips. You're starting to feel some of these aches and pains that you didn't feel before, yes or no? Nervousness. Are you sweating more, talking faster than you used to, trying to get things done? You find yourself rushing, always have this sense of tension and nervousness, or a sense of fatigue. Are you feeling like you just don't have enough energy to continue on? You just always want to kick your feet up and relax a little bit. Or your immune system may be low. You find yourself getting a lot more sick, nowadays than you have been, whether it be cold or flu or any other ailments that you may have. Time pressure. Do you feel as if you just need some more time? You're rushing, you're moving, you're going. Like, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do these things. Just not enough time in the day. Now, if you answered yes to 3 or more of these, you're considered to have chronic stress. And some people say that's normal. Everybody experiences chronic stress. Well, everyone experiences stress, but chronic stress can be a lot more detrimental to our overall health and wellness. So, kind of making this relationship between stress and our emotional state. These two are directly connected. There's something called the mind and body connection, which basically states that our body is going to respond based on how we feel, how we think, our emotional state. If we are in a state of stress, our body is going to tell us that. Sometimes it tells us that by, being forgetful. Sometimes we sweat. Sometimes, we do things in a hurry. Sometimes we rush, we fidget. Our body is naturally going to react based on our emotional state. And stress will alter our outlook. It alters our attitudes. It alters our moods, our feelings. Sometimes we want to sleep more. Sometimes we just want to go until we crash. Stress will make you unaware and unwilling to recognize or change some of those behaviors. And so by being stressful or in stressful conditions, we're not even recognizing that our body's changing. Sometimes we don't even recognize some of the things that we're doing, whether it be biting our fingernails, pulling our hair. We just do it as a response to the stress, but not even consciously being aware of that. And then stress can cause a lot of different physical, emotional, and spiritual consequences. It can cause us to make irrational decisions, to have irrational thoughts. And so stress is extremely important to address in our lifestyle because it will definitely have an impact on all the other different dimensions of wellness. If we're consistently under stress, we're not going to be thinking about our spiritual wellness state. If we're consistently under stress, we're not going to be worried about our social wellness. We're not going to be worried about our intellectual wellness or even our physical wellness. And so understanding that stress can have a tremendous impact on all the other different dimensions of wellness is important for us to start to recognize, well, now I need to know and make some stress management plans and techniques. Now, what is stress? Stress is that non-specific response to the body to a stimulus or demand placed on it. And so it's something that the body reacts to based on a situation that we find ourselves in. Tension, emotional strain, due to any type of demanding circumstances, whether it be work-related, family-related, social-related, any kind of demand that we're putting ourselves into a situation to respond to can be stressful, can be considered a stressful situation. When it becomes chronic, it's something that's ongoing, that we're always finding ourselves trying to do, and realizing that we're not giving ourselves enough to each and every area and field that we're trying to balance out. That's stressful in itself. It's difficulty that causes any type of worry, that causes some type of emotional tension, that causes us to distract from the bigger picture. It prevents us from focusing. It's our body's way of responding to the demands of life or the demands of any type of situation that we're placed in. And so stress is all of those things. And there's different types of stress. There's survival stress. This is stress that in any particular situation, we receive that immediate fight or flight response. Our body quickly receives this release of adrenaline or epinephrine, and it causes us to do one thing or another. Sometimes we can be in a stressful situation and we can say, you know what, I'm going to push through this. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to persevere. I'm going to go as hard as I can. I'm going to give all. Or sometimes we can say, you know what, I'm giving up. I'm just going to completely run away from it. And so the survival stress that we experience can have a positive or negative outcome, but regardless, it's still stressful. There's internal stress, and this is when we begin to place a lot of worry, concern, responsibility on ourselves for things that are really outside of our control. It's called internal stress. We're thinking about something all the time. Maybe it's something that someone else may be saying or doing. We have no control over outside forces other than our own personal actions. And so putting that stress on ourselves and worrying about something all the time is internal stress that can be damaging as well. There's environmental stress, and that's just stress response to the things around us, whether it be crowds, noise, people, places, those things. And then there's fatigue stress, and that's something that once we go through stress over a long period of time, it starts to affect our ability to plan, our ability to focus, our ability to communicate, our ability to hold up to our responsibilities and just the demands that we have. And so all these different types of stress can be hazardous to our health. They can cause us to worry consistently. They can cause us to give up. They can cause us to, experience some health complications as well. So stress will have a variety of consequences on our life if we don't have a way to manage that stress. Now, there's two different categories of stress: eustress and distress. Eustress is what's considered positive. That's when we think about that fight or flight and we have that initial fight response, something that's going to motivate us to do something positive. I mentioned before about studying for a test. That's stressful. If we're having a big test coming up, I'm thinking about right now, my daughter is trying to plan for her driver's test. It's an extremely stressful situation. But the eustress, the positive motivating factor in that is that if she passes this test, she'll be able to drive. That's eustress. So she's focusing all her efforts in passing this test, trying to understand exactly what needs to be done so she doesn't fail, so she doesn't have a flaw. Distress is something that is consistent. and it happens over a period of time, over and over and over again. So it's a negative stress that leads to negative patterns or thoughts and actions. If my daughter was to just consistently dwell on failing this test, oh, if I fail the test, then I'm never going to be able to drive, or I'm going to have to wait a longer period of time. What are my friends going to say about me? That would be an example of distress. Someone who is really focusing on all of the negatives and not rationally thinking about the positive outcomes that can happen. So eustress can be situational. It can be something that motivates you to get some work done. Distress is something that's going to take your mind away from any positive outcomes or positive benefits and cause you to dwell on the negative issues on a regular basis. Now, when we are initially presented with a stressful situation, we'll respond certain ways. Okay, so first of all is something called the primary appraisal. And this is, as soon as that stressful event is presented to us, we're going to look at it and we're going to kind of make this appraisal as to whether or not the situation is really irrelevant. If it's not something to stress over, we're going to look at it if it's something that's positive. Is it going to cause us some eustress, or we're going to look at it as something that's going to cause distress. And that initial primary appraisal is going to determine our actions. The secondary appraisal, after we kind of determine whether it's irrelevant, positive, or stressful, is going to indicate whether or not we feel we have some control and how much control we will have over that particular situation. If we look at something that's going to be irrelevant, we can say, you know what, I don't have any control over this, or I have a lot of control over this, but the stress, the worry, dwelling on this is not going to make a difference, and so I'm not going to make a big issue out of it because it's either outside of my control or I control it. We can say this is going to be positive. And that secondary appraisal is it's positive because I have direct control over this, and I know whatever I do is going to impact this positive outcome of the stressful situation. Or we can look at it as something that's distressful initially. Our secondary appraisal can be a sense of helplessness. Oh, I'm going to dwell over this. There's no hope. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stress over this. And so we typically have those two different responses to stress. Trying to focus our attention in the positive area is very difficult to do. We're pretty much hardwired to worry, to stress. That initial appraisal, however, is going to determine the final outcome. And so trying to look at things in a positive situation where it's going to be eustress rather than distress is difficult to do, but it's a good habit to get into. Now, regardless, I mentioned before, we are going to experience stressful events. We are going to experience problems in our life that will cause us to worry, that will cause us to cry, that will affect our feelings and our emotions. And this is why these are connected. But knowing that we're going to experience some of these things, it's important to say to ourselves, okay, I need to mentally prepare myself for some of the stressful events that is going to occur in life. Now, whatever you do for your stress management plan and technique comes in as valuable practice right now. So the death of a spouse, divorce, marriage separation, someone going to jail, you possibly going to jail, death of a family member, anything unplanned, just change. All of these things listed here are stressful events that we are likely to experience in life. Some of them are going to cause us to dwell on them. Some of them is going to be states. Some of them are going to be traits. Some of them are going to cause us to fall into a sense of depression. But recognizing that these are going to happen, we need to think about how can I address these when they do happen. You may not be 100% prepared, but getting into a mindset of, I know I'm going to experience some of these things. What are some possible stress management plans I can implement that's going to help me to overcome these and not allow them to really take over my life and make me fall into a sense of chronic stress? Well, our body is going to respond to different stressful situations differently. Typically, in a stressful situation, our mind is going to recognize this as something that the body needs to react to. And oftentimes the body can react with headaches, changes in your mood, your attitude, your outlook, emotional fluctuations. It can cause you to have difficulty sleeping or kind of force you to want to sleep, to want to rest, to want to rejuvenate, cause you to lose focus, to have difficulty concentrating on particular task, inability to multitask, cause you to have panic attacks where your heart rate is increasing and you're really stressed and worried. That's one way the body responds to stress. Your heart is going to respond to that as well. I mentioned, having an increased heart rate. You may have heart palpitations, increased blood flow. You can have fluctuations in your blood pressure, decrease in flow to your stomach and your skin. It can put you at a risk of heart attack. And there are several different medical physicians that will tell you stressful situations and chronic stress will contribute to having a heart attack, whether it be mild or severe. It's important that we recognize that our body is going to respond a certain way to stress, and we have to understand how to balance that out. Our stomach, we may start to feel a sense of, nauseousness. We may have stomach aches or stomach pains. We may even have butterflies in our stomach, that little nervousness that we get. Increase or decrease in appetite, so we'll have fluctuations on, whether or not we want to eat and how much we do eat. Heartburn, acid reflux, intestinal issues, all of those things are going to be manifested because of stressful situations. We can have an increase or decrease in insulin production. Our pancreas and intestines are going to be affected. Our liver can respond differently. We can have fluctuations in our blood sugar levels. It increases the risk of having type 2 diabetes. And so here we start to see a direct relationship between our physical health and emotional health and stress. Because if we are individuals who are consistently stressing over things, that is going to help us or cause us to increase the risk of having type 2 diabetes, which is interesting. Fats released into our blood, we can experience diarrhea, difficulty with weight gain, with digestion, fluctuations in our weight. All of those things are different physiological or biological responses to stress. And which is why we recognize this as not only a leading cause of death, but a contributing factor to a lot of other declines in dimensions of wellness as well. So some signs, some symptoms, a behavioral sign, individuals who are consistently negative, who always have what we call this nasty attitude. That's a sign of someone who's consistently under stress. Increased irritability, lack of focus, overeating, drinking, a use of drugs, engaging in these devastating or detrimental behaviors. All of those things are different signs of someone who is consistently stressed, looking for an outlet. We need to have some type of positive management plan in place so that we don't start to engage in destructive behaviors. Also, emotional signs. Going back to some of those things we talked about, feeling powerless, depression, hopelessness, that pessimistic outlook, having a lack of motivation, always wanting to sit, just kick up our feet, not do anything, not engage. Individuals who seem to just consistently cry or just cry, just outburst in crying, which we may not know why they're crying. Dwelling on certain issues is also stressful for individuals. Anger, unhappiness, all of these things are emotional signs of someone who is suffering from some stressful situation. Recognizing these signs is helpful in us to try to intervene and help them overcome so that they don't become chronic problems. Cognitive signs, inability to make decisions, someone who is not keeping up their responsibilities, who's not consistently holding up their end of a bargain or maintaining their word. Negative thinking, inability to focus and multitask, someone who is not laughing as much as they used to, someone who consistently forgets. And sometimes, I forget all the time anyway, and so sometimes I say, it's stress. I try to blame it on stress rather than old age or me losing my mind. But forgetfulness is a cognitive sign of stress. And someone who's short-tempered, being easily angered, quick to attack and not really listen to what's being said, but to look at things as a personal attack. That's part of stress as well. Now, all of these signs can be triggered by stressful situations, but some of these signs are also evidence of other things going on in life. But for the most part, we can usually attribute them to stress and stressful situations. Now, stress has been called the greatest single most contributing factor to illness in the industrialized world. We are a stressful people. A lot of the problems that we have can be traced to stress. So what do we do? How do we overcome that? We need to have some stress management plans in place. And we need to think about how we respond to stress individually. So what things influence your emotional wellness? What things are going to cause you to have more stress or less stress? Because you remember, your emotions and levels of stress are related. How does your attitude relate to emotional wellness and stress management? What is the purpose of stress management? What personal choices are involved in coping with stress? These are some questions we need to ask ourselves before we get into a situation in which stress in our lives and our lack of emotional wellness in our lives are going to be more detrimental to our health. So what is stress management? Well, it's the idea and the thought and the practice of something that is going to develop positive coping habits, something that addresses the stress in a way in which it doesn't become chronic, in which it doesn't negatively impact any type of functioning or any type of responsibilities that we have. So the ability to develop positive methods of coping with stress, it's a technique or method that helps us create this state of peace, this state of calmness, this state of relaxation where we can realize, well, I'm going to experience stress. I'm not going to let it bother me. I'm not going to let it affect my overall wellness, my physical wellness, or my emotional wellness. And so recognize what we call hidden stress issues. And those are things that slowly develop stress that we don't really look at as stressful situations. So a hidden stress issue can be a person. It can be someone that we need to just remove ourselves from. It can be situational. It can be things that we do. Once we start to feel our body tense, once we start to maybe experience a headache, we need to recognize that those are signs of stress. And sometimes we carry stress and we think we're managing it when we're not really addressing it or doing anything to create this sense of calmness or this sense of peace in our body, but rather we're just kind of carrying it, and we say we're coping with it or we're dealing with it, but we're not doing anything that's going to minimize or release that stress. And so we have to practice this daily on a regular basis. So some things that individuals do to manage or cope with stress: prayer is number one, which is where we bring in the connection of our spiritual wellness, because our spiritual wellness, once again, gives us this sense of purpose. It's a place that we go to when we realize, well, I'm going to experience stress, but I'm not going to experience things that are going to be hazardous to my health. I do have this sense of peace, this sense of calmness that God is going to take care of me, and that provides us with some relaxation and peace in our mind. Exercise, trying to focus and emphasize the positive experiences and the blessings that we have, documenting, things that occur in our life. Sometimes we can look back and say, this is a stressful situation, but this is how I overcame it, and these are some of the things that I did to remove that stress from my life. So keeping a journal is helpful in reflecting back and realizing that, we can overcome stress. Eating healthy, there's a direct correlation between positive, good eating habits and minimal stress. Being able to laugh, so that sense of humor, getting a lot of sleep. Also chewing gum. Sometimes people just chew gum because that's going to relax the muscles in the jaw, relax the muscles in the neck. So some of that tension you can feel just kind of being released just as you chew gum. Listening to some music that you enjoy, helping others, serving others, so volunteering somewhere, having pet time. Pets are now, they're emotional friends. We use them for social reasons. We use them to help ease a lot of anxiety. And so, having some pet time, just spending time with an animal, is extremely useful in minimizing and preventing stress. Sharing your feelings, talking to someone, being open and honest about what's going on in your mind and in your life. Seeking medical assistance. Sometimes it reaches a point where chronic stress has been so consuming in your life that medication is the next step. And eventually you can wean yourself off of that medication, but sometimes we find ourselves in a place where we have to have medication in order to cope. And once we start to implement many of these other management techniques into our lives, we can find ourselves pulling away from that medication. And then just positive people around us, our support networks, individuals that are going to lift us up, that's going to listen to us, that are going to help us to overcome some of the negative issues and stressful events in our lives. So understand that there is a direct link and connection within all the different dimensions of wellness, especially how you handle and how you manage stress with your emotional state and your spiritual state, as well as your physical state. And we'll talk about the other dimensions of wellness coming up soon. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me.